What is the spiritual connection between human beings and nature? There have been speculations on this subject from the very beginning of human consciousness. Historically speaking, human beings became first conscious of the forces of nature before they became conscious of the presence, the power, the authority of the Creator. The idea that there is one Creator who creates and sustains the whole of the cosmos, of which our Earth is a small part, is a comparatively uh, new or young emergence or idea in the spiritual history of humankind. The intuition that there is something of very profound significance between human beings and the total context of their life, which we denote by the word nature or creation, of which we are a part. This idea has existed almost in every tradition of human spiritual awareness. In this video, we tried to cultivate some very basic and preliminary understanding of this very important connection. A connection that the modern man has lost sight of, with serious consequences to nature, which we today refer to as climate change, crisis in creation, environmental crisis, so on and so forth. So it's a very serious issue. And human beings or humankind as a whole is singularly responsible for the crisis in nature, the very unsustainability of the natural home that the earth is to human beings. And the different schools of thought in the subject, one trying to justify that human beings are given the right, the birthright, the monopoly by the Creator Himself to do what they like with the creation, and even if what they like to do with the creation endangers it, well, that's how it is. What can we do about it? The other idea is that no, God has not given the earth or the nature to us as freehold. It is in trusteeship. We therefore have to exercise stewardship of the world, the earth, the nature, etc., in an attitude of accountability to God. So the various opinions. Now, let's begin to think very basically on this issue. What is the spiritual connection? Not so much the scientific connection or the cultural connection, as the spiritual connection between human beings and nature. The very first indication of this is in the second chapter of the book of Genesis, where Adam is given the responsibility to till the land and to take care of the garden. So, take care of the garden. So, human beings are placed in a state of responsibility vis-a-vis this garden, this huge garden that the world is. Now, when we come to the New Testament, we have very interesting statements by Jesus which can be connected to this, though often they are not understood in connection with this early indication given in the Old Testament. Jesus says, "Behold the lilies of the field, behold the birds of the air." So about the lilies of the world, he says that they neither sow nor reap, yet God provides for it. Not even Solomon in all his glory was arrayed like one of these. Behold the birds of the air, God provides for them. Then come to the statement where Jesus says, God cares for you. Every hair on your head is numbered, and not one of them falls down without the Father's permission. It's a caring God. God pays minute personal attention to every human being. And also this further emphasis in the teachings of Jesus Christ that God provides for the good and the evil alike, the saint and the sinner. From God's perspective, there is nothing dispensable in anything that He has created. Why does God forgive? And why is it that there is no limit to God's forgiveness? Is it because God is morally insensitive? Or is it that God tries to endeavor till the very last to see that every particle of His creation is kept intact? And if there is some infection or a disease in a certain limb of the nature He has created, He endeavors to heal it. So, while Christians focus mostly on the healing ministry of Jesus Christ, from a wider perspective, we need to also consider the healing ministry of God, which includes the whole of creation in its ambit. In the ambit of Jesus' ministry of healing, it's mostly healing of individuals. In the ambit of God's ministry of healing, the whole of creation is included. So it's because God endeavors without end and without ceasing to keep the whole of creation in good health. And therefore, He endeavors to minister to those sick dimensions or parts or ingredients of the nature that is created, that He tries to be never-ending in His mercy, unending in His endeavor to minister to the health of His creation. And for this, He has to exercise patience, particularly with those elements which seem to be pathological, which seems to be undermining the health of the rest of creation as well. But then there is a limit when the particular element or limb or member seems to be completely incorrigible, and the threats to the viability and health of the rest of creation is very serious. Then, of course, punitive response happens, and in biblical thought, there is a margin for that as well. So there is a very precarious balance between providence and punishment. I don't want to go into that because that will take me far beyond the scope of the present analysis. Now, the main thing for us to therefore understand is this. Why does God pay attention to the lilies of the field, the grass that is out there which is seen today and will not be seen tomorrow, the birds in the air, aspects of nature to which we pay no attention? Why is it that nothing happens in the created world without God knowing it? Or why is it that God pays particularized attention to every item, every ingredient in creation? And this is something that we need to understand if we are to understand the spirituality of our relationship with nature as envisaged in the biblical vision of things. And I'm sure similar insights are found in all other religious traditions, but because I'm not a scholar of religions or comparative religions, I will stay focused mostly on the biblical understanding of this very important aspect of life and leave it to my viewers from other traditions to connect these ideas to their own traditions and then understand it even better. And they can also share the fruits of their thinking and analysis through their responses, which would then be a source of further enrichment for all of us. Now, the idea that God is the creator of everything there is a very significant idea. And if that idea is not accepted, then the idea that God pays particularized attention to every aspect of His creation and that He is as much bothered about what happens to an isolated plant in nature as He is to the well-being of you and me, which is not a particularly flattering thought for most of us, we can't understand that. In fact, one of the reasons why it's very difficult for human beings to understand the ways of God, or why God's ways are inscrutable or mysterious to human beings, is that we don't have this wider perspective. Our outlook is not holistic, whole, W-H-O-L-I-S-T, not H-O-L-I-S-T-I-C. That is a vision that embraces the totality of the created order. Whereas all of the created order exists together in the mind of the Creator. Otherwise, He would not be Creator. The basic logic in God being the Creator is that there is a definite and organic connection between God and every particle of the created order, which has its origin in Him. Just as a work of art is connected to the artist which created it in its totality, with nothing excluded from the total picture, so also the whole of the created world being the work of art of God, God as the Creator, there is an inevitable, inalienable link, very real, very sensitive, very purposive, between God and every particle of nature, every particle of the created order. Now, there is a further insight that's important for us to realize to understand this particular aspect that I have already highlighted, namely the very particular, purposive, personalized interest that God takes, perhaps cannot but take, in every aspect of creation. Something that we find so very difficult to understand or accept. For example, Christians find it very difficult to accept that their God, and they believe there is only one God, they find it very difficult to believe that their God can take interest in non-Christians. Or, in a further outlandish sweep of thought, that their God can take interest in unbelievers, in atheists, in freethinkers, in communists, and anyone who is different from their, different to them. Whereas if you really believe that God is the creator of the whole cosmos and everything in it, you cannot but believe that God is as much interested in people who are completely different to you and even hostile to you as He is interested in you. Otherwise, God cannot be the creator. It is this that Christians find extremely difficult. The more religious, the more fervent you are in your religiosity, the more difficult you find to accept the implications of the theological belief, the dogma, the doctrine that God is a creator. In fact, what Christians don't realize is that you cannot be Christians without rejecting God as the creator. And I repeat, you cannot be the sort of Christians you are today. You can be a follower of Jesus Christ, but you cannot be Christians if you accept God as the creator. Because God as a creator, an aspect of which is revealed to Peter through that very significant dream given to him as recorded in the 10th and 11th chapters of the book of Acts of the Apostles. God does not practice partiality, because God as creator cannot practice partiality. If God were not the creator, He could have and He would have practiced partiality. But Christians can love only a God who practices partiality. And unfortunately, this is also true of all other religions, because when you belong to a religion, you have to and you come under the obligation to believe that God is partial to you, and therefore God is indifferent or even hostile to those who are outside your religious camp. That's why I'm saying you can either believe that God is a creator, or you can be a Christian, the sort of Christian that you are today. Or if you believe that God is the creator, then you have to renounce this present form of Christianity and you have to go back to Jesus Christ, who did not accept any of these divisive labels and who treated the whole world as one, and He was truly a global world citizen. Otherwise, He wouldn't have taught that God is neither on this mountain nor on that mountain. God is spirit, And to worship Him, you have to worship Him in spirit and truth. Spirit and truth are spirit and truth embrace the whole of human experience. The moment you chop up human situations, chop up the whole into parts, isolated, dismembered parts, you become incapable of truth. That was the reason why Jesus did not give an answer to Pontius Pilate's question, what is truth? Because for Pontius Pilate to sit in that seat of judgment representing the authority of Rome, the imperial force, which has already accepted, internalized, and institutionalized this idea of the world divided into us and them, which is what imperialism is all about. You go out and conquer others because they're different from you. And in fact, people like Alexander the Great believed that by conquering the world, they could establish peace and create unity in humankind. People, such aberrations of thought come into the minds of people who believe that their power is a solution to all the problems in the world. However, that's another issue. So I restate my insight that either you believe in a creator God and then follow up its consequences, and therefore rise above all distinctions and discriminations based on religious differences and differences of gods. There's only one God, therefore you can't have differences based on gods. Or you believe that God is not the creator, and therefore we have created our own gods, and we have every right to expect that our God would be partial to us and would be hostile to others who are different to us. These are the only two positions. There can't be a via media between the two. Now let's take another step forward. If God is a creator God, then what happens is every particle of creation implies each other. Now the grass in my courtyard has a connection to me. I have a connection to the little bird that is chirping in my back garden. And that little bird is connected to the dog that is barking in the next door neighbor's house. And that dog is connected to the rain that falls over the Amazon, because the whole of it exists together. And human beings may not have the ability to see these interconnections. But anything that happens and everything that happens because of a whole range of interconnectivities. For example, if I as a farmer plant a seed, for that seed to sprout and become a sapling, a small little plant, it needs the light and heat of the sun at a huge distance from itself. It also needs water from the distant sea. And when it grows up, it establishes a kind of organic connection or connectivity with all the plants, creatures, etc. around. And it's amazing to sense, to intuit this interconnectivities in nature. Now, when you sow a seed, unknown to us, maybe 1 million forces are acting on it. We do not know. We do not know what happens to a sown seed in its subsoil existence. What are the forces acting on it? Nobody really knows. I don't think science has fully inventoried all the forces acting on a seed which causes it to sprout. So maybe the whole of the creator order is acting on it. We do not know. So my sense of nature, and I share an organic link with nature. When I see a green plant, a new green shoot there, I feel that something beautiful is happening within me. That may be the reason why these thoughts wake up within me. So, a person who is spiritually sensitive, who really believes that God is the creator of everything, she knows that everything in nature implies each other. Therefore, human beings cannot really think of their progress, their well-being, their gain in isolation from the welfare of the nature around them or the created order as a whole. It is this that is implied in the Old Testament insight that God gave to Adam the responsibility to take care of the garden. To take care of the garden is primarily to sense a necessary and inevitable connection, an organic link, a sense of oneness with creation. Because you are created by the Creator God, so is the rest of creation as a whole. You are one with all that God has created, except that in you the consciousness of God has attained the highest possible degree, potentially highest possible degree of awareness, and therefore you are placed in a state of responsibility for the integrity and the welfare of creation as a whole, a responsibility that is not very real for the birds out there or the animals around you or in the jungle or whatever. But human beings are given this very special responsibility to look after and to ensure the integrity and the wholeness of creation as a whole. And that is because everything involves everything else. And human beings alone are in a position to realize this and to act accordingly. And therefore, the lifestyle question that comes up in spirituality is this: how do I modulate my lifestyle so as to harmonize it with this very fundamental duty cast upon me to be a caretaker of nature? The fact that something is possible, the fact that I can afford something doesn't mean that I should use it. For example, when I was in Delhi, and you know Delhi summer is very hot, temperature goes up above 46 degrees centigrade. I tried my level best not to use air conditioning because it's harmful to nature. I tried to simplify my life to the extent that the least possible strain is caused to the integrity of creation. I don't use more than 20 liters of petrol per month. That's a ceiling I've imposed on myself. And if my car can't manage with 20 liters, then I use public transport. Or if I am not able to do that, then I use, of course, an auto rickshaw, because that helps someone to earn a livelihood. As far as my car is concerned, I've imposed a ceiling of 20 liters, normal, routinely. If I have to go and visit somebody at a distance, is a different matter. Routinely, per month consumption of petrol, I have limited to 20 liters. This is not an exaggeration. I try to use as little water as possible, except that the one luxury I afford myself is a very generous bath, because that is a very major determinant of my sense of well-being, my clarity of thought, etc. My food habits, etc. All these things I have designed in light of this Old Testament revelation that we are placed in a state of responsibility to take care of the garden of life. Now, that awareness becomes real even in the light of the various revelations or discoveries of science. Science has increasingly demonstrated the fact that everything in nature is interconnected. Now, for example, even before the idea of the single creator came up, you have the idea of polytheism. Why did polytheism come up? Because when human beings looked at nature, they found nature full of diversity. There was thunder, there was lightning, there was a storm, there is water, there is fire, there is earth, and all kinds of things. So the early man couldn't believe that one single God could create all of this. So they thought that different gods were necessary to create these different specialized items. That is supposed to be the origin of polytheism. Much later, as human consciousness developed, the idea came that if different gods are creating these different entities, then there can be no unity in nature, and then there can be no sense of holism, that is, mutually reinforcing, mutually affirming, mutually nourishing relationship, and a sense of oneness and integrity in the creation as a whole. Therefore, once that awareness came up, it became necessary to intuit the one creator as against the many creators, which is the hallmark of the polytheistic idea of religion. It is not that one is inherently superior and the other is inferior. It is that the polytheistic interpretation of the origin of the world came up at a time when human consciousness could not intuit the possibility of one particular God being capable of creating this amazing, incredible variety and diversity of manifestations of life. So gradually it gave way to monotheism. So the idea of the creator, now I come to the final state of my argument, began to be diluted with the advent of science. Why? Because armed to the teeth by the equipment or the technology of science, inspired by unlimited, unbridled covetousness and greed, human beings began to see nature so much as part of their own life, but as a mere resource, a mere quarry, which they were licensed by God Himself to exploit at will. So the idea that human beings had to be caretakers of nature gave way in the wake of the development of science and technology. The human beings are as the predators of nature. And actually, it is to this shift in understanding, this terrible and tragic shift in understanding, that crisis in creation, or the environmental crisis that we today talk about, must be attributed. In other words, humankind had stayed faithful to the spiritual understanding of their relationship to nature, deemed themselves the caretakers of nature rather than people licensed to exploit nature at will, the present crisis would have been averted. But when I say this, many people, the scientists and all, the fashionable people, will laugh at me. Oh, in which world are you living? In which century are you living? So on and so forth. But this is a fact. If man becomes a predator vis-a-vis nature, nature will suffer. No question about it. So, is it possible for us to regain our spiritual intuition regarding our place in nature or the place of nature in our life? Can we regain the lost vision that we are meant to be caretakers of nature? In which case, perhaps this great and looming impending tragedy can be averted. Already signs and symptoms are very alarming globally of climate change, the kind of natural disasters that are multiplying year after year, not so much in numbers as also in intensity. There is considerable alarm everywhere, but human beings find themselves impossible to mend their ways, and that's because so long as we stay stuck only to the scientific idea that we have the power and therefore the license to exploit creation, the whole of the created order at will, without any checks and balances, then this crisis is bound to aggravate. And I believe that the only solution is to regain the lost spiritual insight that necessarily, inescapably, we are placed in a position of responsibility for the health and wholeness of the creation as a whole. Therefore, we have to adjust our lifestyle, our idea of progress, our idea of power, in light of this inescapable, irreducible sense of responsibility we need to exercise in dealing with or in relating to nature. So these are some preliminary thoughts about how we are connected to nature and how that connection needs to influence the lifestyle choices that we make. And on the macro scale, mega scale, what kind of policies of development and what sort of technologies for development we must consider legitimate, and up to what extent, so on and so forth. Thank you and all the very best.